So I'm gonna try to keep this brief because I it's just an impulse. I was explaining this to my wife, and she said, "Wow, you should write this down so I can spend time reading it because this is really interesting." I'm like, "Okay, cool. This makes sense to someone." So I'm gonna sit down and explain this again. There's a lot of oversimplification stuff, but it fundamentally makes sense. So you have the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, who are the most sophisticated society of the ancient world to date. The most, they had I'd say the most developed underclass. Their underclass, the lowest among them, were higher than the highest in many other societies. Read the Odyssey, read the character of Eumaeus, and for this reason, the Greeks and all subsequent societies have decided to copy them. Now, they disappeared for reasons that we don't entirely know why, but suffice to say, despite their advancements, they were insufficient to survive, but their ideas did not go extinct and were later fully developed. And when you think about society as the progressive effort of families to realize their ideal over generations, you realize that the highest in society are very closely related to the lowest in society. And any society of people which claims to be enlightened must either, like the Jews, define enlightenment or define membership by the ability to read and self-identify with the group, which is a mechanism. I mean, the reason that the only reason that the Jews can have such in-group preference without bankrupting themselves is because if you can't read and do the bat mitzvah and stuff, you're kind of not Jewish. So you have to there's a certain threshold. It's not simply hereditary, it's also actions as well. And actions that require a certain level of intelligence. And the reason for that is because we live in the fallen world, and you gotta there's a sacrifice of self that must be made to survive, and we admire societies that sacrifice less of the self because they've figured out clever ways to avoid that. It's we see Egypt and we say an unsophisticated society, there's just slaves and masters, and it's well, your inability to create a society that doesn't sacrifice everything at the idol of slave and master as the encompassing identities of human beings create it, it's just, that's a high sacrifice. Whereas the ancient Greeks, you could be a slave like Eumaeus, but you were still a respected individual made in the image of the gods, who could aspire to the highest ideal, who was worthy of the highest ideal, who was honored by his king as an equal and not as a animal. And that is a more enlightened society because they've actually figured out how to create good people. They don't simply cut off the gangrenous bits of themselves as they rot away, consuming more and more like a dying snake. But that is the human condition, and that is always kind of happening. And, the sickly die in childbirth and stuff. And it's this has been baked into our experience of reality from the very beginning. And this has been what we've always fought against. Oh, all the children that must die. Even the child sacrifice is almost it is a cry to both the effort it takes to raise a child and the pain of losing other children. Both those things mimetically acted out in their perverse form. And our ability to articulate ourselves to ourselves in language, which is ever changing, because some languages are made for oppression. I have a belief that's unsubstantiated by any research. It's not unsubstantiated. I have a belief, and we can get into it, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but it makes sense. It's that the Egyptian language was created like an elaborate form of legalese to trap the lower classes who could never understand the nuance because they were deprived of the means of the education in said nuance, so that they could be continually oppressed through what was presented as their own ignorance but was in fact baked into the linguistic structure in a not dissimilar way from the way that legalese is different than English in modern society. But I mean, like, there's just not like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, like someone else figure out a better system. Okay, like we're still working with the same building blocks fundamentally. Like, I like the phrase we're all building with the same Legos, or like that guy's building with the same Legos. Like, we're building with the same Legos as the ancient Egyptians. So this stuff's gonna look a little similar. So basically, in ancient Egypt, again, follows the despotic pattern that is native to the unconscious man, which is simply the big chief with the big stick, crook in the flail, in case of the Egyptian pharaoh, who runs everything and makes all decisions and is the state and is the head patriarch. And this is the same as an empire. This is like the one big man government, which is the government that presides in Africa and presides in most societies. And even like China is the one big man. Like, they have Xi Jinping, and Russia's got Putin. And it's just sort of that despotic thinking appeals to the dysregulated and underactive mind that is malnourished. So, and I'm not saying that in a condemning way. It's just simply the case that it is so. So basically, we have this form of government, the one big man form of government, and then we have the form of government described in Mycenaean Greece, which is basically houses that are well-run families which vote on kings of island nation states. Basically a republic. I mean, like, that sounds like a well-run republic to me, which we've been trying to replicate since then unsuccessfully. And we could say, well, why has it been unsuccessful? And I would say it kind of fundamentally comes down to shame. Like, ultimately, it's like shame in human nature. It's like we mess up and then we lose the ability to trust ourselves, and then we project our distrust onto others who we make our slaves, and then force to act out our will in ways that always dissatisfy us because we don't know ourselves and what we're asking. And this is why Jesus praised the Roman centurion who said, I say to one man, go, and he goes to another man. Like, that guy who, through his martial arts, because that's what it is, literally the origin of martial arts, Mars, god of war, martial, the art of war, Rome, worship Mars, martial art, like the original martial artist guy, literally like the original martial artist guy, by his pursuit of being a good leader and like actually building a system that like, he just seemed like a really competent dude. And like, I get this like from my dad, like a lot of like my dad has systems that he makes run well. And there's just a certain attitude you have to make the system run well. And I recognize that attitude in the centurion, in my father. And it's like, oh, look, it's the spirit of the Father. It's God the Father. It's Kleos, the glory of the fathers that the Mycenaeans talked about. Patroclus literally means the glory of the fathers. Achilles, like his friend Patroclus, like, it's probably a dude named Patroclus, but they named him that because they were obsessed with the glory of the fathers. Like, that's the glory of the fathers. That's why Odysseus brags about being able to do the most chores. But again, this competence cannot be obtained without a certain grace of self-forgiveness that only comes by understanding the nature of God, which can only be done at a mass scale, or I'd say even at any scale, profoundly and honestly and continually, by either anticipation of the Savior or by the recognition of the Savior. So then once we get the Savior, now we have the ability to embody Mycenaean Greece, which we've been trying to embody forever and a day. And then we basically just get continuous despotism until we get a confederacy of despots who then create some way of getting along to the point where they can have like something akin to like Mycenaean trade, which produces the sort of thinking that colonizes the new world. So then the old world, so now there's immediately there's a few revolutions that happen at the same time. The insistence on truth through the Christian revelation creates a society that does not immediately destroy the printing press and kill everyone who knows about it. Now that the printing press is disseminated, ideas can be disseminated. Now, that same Egyptian trickery that has forever been used by the ruling class to keep out the underclass and oppress them no longer works because you have a printing press. Literally. We can get into that forever and a day. This creates a revolution of ideas in Europe and a revolution of people leaving for the New World. These go on simultaneously until eventually there's the American Revolution. The American Revolution inspires the French Revolution, showing that half the people who were capable of revolution and wanted it and understood the need for revolution, read The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine if you want to actually understand the need for revolution. He talks about this too. Half came to the United States and half were in France. You could argue that there were some in Germany as well, engaging in a German revolution of ideas, which would later move to the United States, as Nietzsche defines the German people as those ever-changing people who are constantly evolving and never themselves, but always themselves by being so. But basically, the French, right after they establish their egalitarian society, elect an emperor because great ideas and new times require new thinking. So basically, this is like, now we're getting into the rate at which ideas dissipate through society. So it took from 32 AD to 1770, for the collective consciousness of the human race to realize that a republic was possible. They then create two republics, basically, the French and the American. The French lose their nerve immediately and elect Napoleon because they were the successful Europeans. They were the Europeans who were dissatisfied, but not enough to actually leave Europe. So they never saw the full measure of their dissatisfaction until the revolution. And they were like, this is nuts. Right back to despotism. And then Europe became so traumatized from despotism that they adopted the American system, but not out of understanding, which we see now. Because of this, Europe has no confidence and has aborted their youth for so long that they must now continually give aid to, they must pay tribute to their Muslim invaders, or else they will face a rebellion that they could not quash. If what was going on in Europe was happening here, I can tell you that people I know or have heard of, dressed as Native Americans, might start killing Muslim rapists for sport, and anyone who's tried to stop us, I mean them. Simply because this is my country. This is my home. There's enough young men that I wouldn't be alone. Probably still would be, but once I was martyred, people would make it a meme. Actually, no, like Kyle Rittenhouse and stuff. Like, Europe will now fall to Islam. That's happening. Maybe Switzerland will hold out because it's cold there and you got to like live in nuanced ways. There might be some pockets, but we're going to see Europe fall to Islam. I don't know how long that's going to last, but it is going to be able to be said that Europe has fallen to Islam, because until Europe has fallen to Islam, the fugue state that Christianity, that Christendom is in, will prevail. We're not going to realize that there's a problem on God's green earth until we're worried about a non-white person ruling over us. And then we're going to see all these not racist neoliberals calling for brown blood because they've never looked at their own shadow because it's black. So literally, my brother's elementary school teacher said that you can't be racist towards white people because there's nothing wrong with them. I live in Massachusetts, or I did at the time. She's the whitest, most neoliberal person you could ever find. That's what they really think. And they're so busy repeating what they're told that they've never even said what they actually think until I told you about it just now. Or until they told my brother and he told me, and you know what I mean? Like, and this is accurate. That is an accurate thing that was said. But basically, though, Europe's going to fall. And then once Europe falls, the West will lose faith temporarily. Like the United States will temporarily lose faith. And in its loss of faith, it will look for strong leaders in industry, religion, politics, all these different things. Like I think there's going to be many different American Napoleons. I think America is very big. There are going to be hopefully many. I mean, that's even why I'm talking about this. I want there to be many American Napoleons rather than one, because one is insecure. Many seeks alliances. And in those alliances, we have truthful discussions, which I believe will be fruitful. There's going to be a Napoleonic rise in the United States for the same reason that there was in Europe. It's going to freak us out. We're going to be like, oh my God, like look at where our ideas have gotten us. And in that loss of self-belief, we will look to those who have self-belief, of which I will be one, provided by the grace of God that I'm alive. And those people will become the new leaders of the new age. This is going to happen with or without me. This is simply the pattern of history that I'm describing. Like, how would the same ideas that the Americans did the revolution, the Americans are going to do the revolution first and the empire last, for probably the same reason that Rhode Island was the first state to sign the Declaration of Independence and the last to ratify the Constitution. That's how we are as people. The first to act and the last to decide. We're the decisive ones of Europe. That's literally it. Like, that's what we are as Americans. We're the decisive element of Europe. This is how the decisive element of Europe operates, evidently. So we have the idea for a revolution for the same reason that the Europeans had the idea for the revolution. We just had it first because we had more self-belief, because we tamed this continent and made it better. We then move first, Europe moves second. Then Europe loses their nerve for the same reason we didn't. But we're going to lose our nerve for the same reason as Europe, because we're still Europeans. We haven't defeated those ideas that made the French lose their nerve and bring about Napoleon. Just haven't. That's why we're obsessed with the Odyssey and Napoleon now. Just coming back. Because the ideas don't die. They just keep resurfacing until they're either incorporated or we destroy ourselves to the point where we'll only have these conversations again in 2,000 years, not realizing we already had them. We are a species with amnesia. But also, I don't remember everything I've ever done, said, or thought, so I'm a human with amnesia. We only know ourselves through our interactions with others, which is why the interactions with others are predictable, because how else would we know ourselves if they weren't? So this is going to come about, but once we have the American Empire, I believe the American Empire will be an empire comprised of warring families competing economically with themselves for domination of the rest of the world and of facets of the rest of the world, while Asia grows steadily in power. Africa populates Europe and loots them, and the United States watches from afar at the truth which Euro-Orientalism exists because of. Like, why do you think people left Africa and went to Europe and the Orient in order to create societies and armies? Because Africa sucks. Why does Africa suck? Because everyone that wanted to improve it left and always has. Why? Because in order to improve, you need people who want to improve. Well, why aren't they in Africa? Here's a thought experiment. Let's say you're a tribe in Africa and you want to be the best tribe ever, you know, like you're just super, like you're a person in Africa, you know, you don't know what year it is. You're in Africa. You're just walking around. It could be fucking 10,000 BC. It could be 500 years in the future. You don't know. You're just a dude in Africa, butt-ass naked with a bow. But you're an awesome dude, you know? Like, if you weren't awesome, your ancestors would have gotten eaten by lions. So you're fucking top of the food chain genetic material. Like, you're sharp as a tack. You have no written history or knowledge that other people do. But you're sharp as a tack. I mean, like, you're just the freaking best dude ever. You know, if you had a Western education, you'd probably take over the world. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? Probably. Maybe. I don't know. It's an experiment. Maybe we could run that experiment. Maybe that's going to be the new conquest of the future, is kidnapping successful African tribesmen and raising them in the West to see if their selection pressure produced people more capable. There's going to be like different biracial eugenics and stuff. You know what I mean? We tried the Nazi shit and it's like, biracial eugenics. Like, people are not that original. And the fact that people are thinking conventionally now is just a byproduct of the fact that you define the thinking you're used to as conventional. So anyway, you're the best African dude ever, and you want to like raise the best family because you're part of the best tribe and everything's the best ever. And you just do that so successfully that you actually end up recruiting all of the other tribes in your local area. And like everyone's just, they're just super into it. Like everyone's super into it. And it works really well, and it's just absolutely amazing. And you just keep on expanding until basically you encounter the element of Africa that caters to the global pedophiles, because all the pedophiles in the world flee to Africa, and all the people who don't want to get raped leave Africa. So even if you create a little African utopia in the middle of Wakanda, in the middle of Africa, you're going to have to deal with all the other African nations that aren't a utopia, because Africa's a giant open map with giant cliffs on all the shores. So it has like very few natural ports, no natural land barrier. There's no natural borders. So anyone who amasses any degree of military competency is going to run into anyone else, and there's going to be very little chance at peace. Unless you built an agrarian society on the Nile, but that would probably only maintain dominance over Africa until technology reached the point where you could actually equip other African tribes to pose sufficient threats, at which point you probably want to create a more stable society, I don't know, on a Mediterranean peninsula. Like, this is just game theory, which can be described because a bunch of people for the last 2,000 years believed that the revelation of God enabled us to understand the world. So they took Hindu zero, Arabic numerals, Roman lettering, and Greek geometry, and molded over for so long that we could actually describe the Christian revelation in mathematical terms in something that we call game theory, which is why this is inevitable. So I don't know. I mean, like, I just think I explained that fairly well. My wife thought so too. So I figured I'd just put it up on YouTube. And let me know what you think in the comments below, because I think that I'm not the first person who's realized this. I think the powers that be are going to look at me and say, oh my God, this guy's going to prevent us from getting the empire we've always wanted. I can't. Nothing I do can prevent that at this point. You're just so close to the problem that you don't see that. I just want it to be an empire of free speech, because if it isn't, what you don't see is that Oriental paranoia will economically, like, the only thing the West has that the Orient doesn't is freedom of speech and the belief in individual ability to discern reality. So if we lose faith in that, we'll economically lose to the Orient, which is what happened for most of the last several thousand years, which is why we haven't had the prosperity we've had, because the Orient does not like change. They just distrust it. It's just kind of comprised of those people who left Africa, who recognized the problem of Africa, but didn't really desire change the way the Europeans did. I think this is where you get the Shem, Ham, and Japheth from Noah, the three sons of Noah. But, and again, like, I'm not saying all Africans. Like, I have two of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Like, 2 out of my top 5 are black or partially black. I know a lot of dumbass white people who can't read. Or they just don't. So I'm assuming they can't because they don't. So it's just the pattern, though. But again, their ancestors left for the same reason. Because it's like you could go to Africa today and find people who are willing to sell their own family into slavery easier than anywhere else on the planet. Most likely. I mean, I think I think at least the idea that that's bad is more successfully taken root in the collective unconscious of other races than it has Africa, in the same way that genocide being bad has occurred to Europeans more than Orientals. So that's why we need Western dominance. I mean, Europe will fall. I've already shown that. But we need Western dominance. And I'm directly like addressing everyone with the capacity to understand this, even those in power. We need Western dominance through the free association of ideas, because that's the only thing that allows us to economically outcompete the Orient. And if we lose the head start we have, we'll never regain it, because that's just like, maybe we will in like forever. I mean, I don't know. I don't want 1,000 years of darkness. Like, I got kids, man. And if you want whatever power you wield to continue, and those who are invested in said power do as well, then so do you. So yeah, we got to build a good world for our kids, I guess. So there's really nothing I can do to prevent the American empire from coming. But I think that by talking about it, I can empower more American Napoleons to, yeah. And I mean, all you need to do is basically just start embodying what Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about in self-reliance, which is, I would say, the principal European revelation and our key insight in the battle against nepotistic despotism. So best of luck. And if you want to follow in the footsteps of myself or Napoleon or any of these people, or you think this idea makes sense and you're like, okay, but how am I going to do that? Like, literally just self-reliance and talk about it on YouTube. People are going to lose self-belief so hard when Europe falls that, like, I don't know, if you've got like a successful garden channel, there will be people who want to call you Demeter incarnate. So I think that's a good place to end. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is entirely impromptu, and I'm kind of tired, and I told myself I wasn't going to make more videos today, but can't fight my own nature. Or I guess I could, but it wouldn't be fun. I like having fun. Dopamine circuitry is useful for learning.